Let's give attention to the past. Let's give attention to the present. And let's give attention to the future. Don't freak out or anything, but you are the future.
Hey, this is Jason Hill on the We Belong Here podcast. Today I'm with Gallant, and we're on a new edition of the Sunday Read. Gallant, your second guest. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Thank you. It's Saturday.
Yeah.
It's a great day.
I know we got a little bit of rain. I didn't have time to take any naps, but
I know. I took 2 naps, but they weren't enough. But that's okay.
Yeah. And so tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name is Gallant Zhuangli Silverglade. I am an education master's student at Hugsy. I have been in teaching in education spheres in different ways for the last 3 or so years. But this program is the first time that I am in charge of a full classroom. And it is rigorous. It is keeping me on my toes. I am in the TTL program, teaching history, teaching 2 12th grade courses at Boston Collegiate Charter School, called Race and Identity in a Global Context. Yeah, and hopefully I get through this degree so I can continue doing work like this.
You sound busy.
Yeah, busy is the word.
Yeah, we're doing what we call a timestamp question. And so if you had to use 1 or 2 words to describe how you're feeling, you all started in January, and in July you started teaching. And so, gosh, you're months in at this point compared to the rest of the school. What are those 1 or 2 words? Yeah.
It's kind of like we've been preparing for this performance, and the performance has finally started. I guess invigorated, exhausted, growing.
Invigorated, exhausting, growing.
Yeah.
Wow. Growth opportunity, growth zone.
Growth, just character building. Every day, trying out a new persona, seeing what works, and having to be in flux and find comfort in that inflexedness.
That speaks to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I listened to thank you for being here, and thank you for sharing your letter with me. And so I listened to your letter, to you reading it, and it was a letter to your past students. And so I would like you to frame up to you writing that letter and what prompted you to actually write it.
Yeah, well, it was an assignment. So credit goes to Professor Eric Soto-Shed, who has just been an incredible advisor and mentor and all the things. And one of his asks at the end of us teaching summer school was that we sort of take a moment to evaluate our pedagogical stance. Like, where are we right now? What are some things that we hold to be true in our educational journey as teachers now? And the value that I speak to, the quotation that I speak to when I first heard it, it was just this gem that so perfectly encapsulated something that I've always held to be true, I think, throughout childhood and young adulthood, which is that attention equals care. And so my mind immediately jumped to that with this assignment because it's a quote that I've shared with my students, and I wanted to build the letter out around this quote.
Wow. Although it was an assignment that is extremely deep.
Yeah. So I think I love a creative process for helping me understand my jumble of thoughts, and this one definitely did that for me, and it's a good anchor, I think is the word he used, something you can come back to, right? What's my why? What are the things that I really, no matter what else goes wrong, need to return to in my classroom?
Well, yes, so I'm a Capricorn, and so I love anchors. I love grounding.
Yeah,
sign.
Me too. Okay, it all makes sense now.
Yeah. And so, you talked some about this process being affirming to you and how you like to operate within like grounding or organizing your own thoughts. And I believe the word you use is in the jumble of your thoughts. And so how will you now, and you said that it was where you were then, how will you now use this letter and this like reflection that was into your pedagogy, into your teaching moving forward?
Yeah, so something I've really learned through this program is that students need a why. They always need to understand the reason behind the relevancy behind a lesson. And in my mind, it's my joy and my responsibility to sort of direct the emotional intelligence of my students as much as it is their curricular intelligence. And the way I do that is constantly getting their attention, constantly telling them to look at one another, to, lean forward in conversation, to demonstrate that they're listening to one another. And even if you're sort of scribbling in your notebook, even if you're like the best at multitasking, being on your computer and you can still hear me, the person speaking doesn't necessarily know that you hear them, right? So it's about translating to them. I hear what you're saying. I care about what you're saying through, your presence and the way that you show up in the class. So I'm constantly telling my students, eyes up here, AirPods out, look at one another, face forward, turn around, all these little things. And unless I explain the why behind that, they won't give it the time of day. So on day 2 of pretty much every class I've taught at this point, in different settings, I've said, this is my value. I'm going to hold you to it because this is my value. I care about your values too. We're going to start with mine. And we did. This is my launch point for talking about community norms and expectations, because I asked last week, our first week of school, that each student come in having thought about a value true to them that they thought would be relevant to our classroom ecosystem. And I started off with mine and this quote, and I said, attention equals generosity equals care. What we're looking for here is not that you're listening necessarily, but that you're showing someone you're listening, that they know you're listening, that they can see that and feel that, more importantly. And so how do your values translate into this classroom? Because this is how mine does. So I take theirs into account as well, but that's my why, at least for this little nagging thing that I do all the time,
Yeah. And the framing of what you just talked about is so productive and productive in building a community and building intentionality within that community. And I'm curious, have you, in stating like, in a community, we share our values and we bring our values with each other and to each other. Have there been conflicting values like within this process of you trying to establish class norms? And like, how do you navigate that, especially with coming in with the importance of your values being attended to? I'm super curious. Yeah.
No, the 18-year-olds take everything I say so seriously. No. Yeah, there's so much tension with that, of course. And I think that you bring up a really good point. Like we're constantly being told, culturally relevant pedagogy, take into account people's backgrounds. And of course, I'm a history teacher. I think about that all the time. So actually, when I explained what I just explained to you, my explanation for this value, my professor said, you have to be careful because in a lot of cultures, looking at someone, especially someone that you're supposed to revere and respect, can come off as disrespectful. And I was like, oh, that's a great point, which is why actually I asked the students, what does attentive listening look like? You tell me. Yeah. You tell me. Yeah. And we'll write it down. Okay, now in our classroom, this person and that person and the other person is saying to them, to their culture, open body language, looking, facing all the things I just named,
Mm-hmm.
that's stuff they're bringing up,
Yeah.
not me. I don't give them the script.
Yeah.
So I think that that's how I try to account for that. But obviously, I have 29 students in one class. You know, the loudest voices are the ones, unfortunately, that are making that list. So I do think that I've been a little bit more, not to say lenient, but I've just been a little more open since my advisor said that, to different forms of listening, which I think is a really important thing for me to take account of.
Yeah, you cleared up my own, I think, misconceptions as well, in terms of like sharing your own, but sharing each other students, or having other students share their own, and really challenge and draw attention to like what is important, you know, to each person, and the why. And so I think oftentimes when I have heard like or maybe even participated in like a standards or a norming session, that level of like detail and nuance into why someone's thinking about I'm being paid attention to may be reflected differently than another person's.
Absolutely.
And so, and so I think that, you explained that really well. And so have you gotten a chance to read your letter to students, or to your past students, or?
Yeah. So I thought about it. I thought about reading it start to finish last week, and I was worried that this sort of like performance of reading a letter start to finish would not be taken super seriously. And so there was that. And the other thing was, the letter addresses a number of my values, not just one, you know, intellectual humility, agency, attention equals care, and suspend ethnocentrism. So those are sort of the four foundational bedrocks of the letter. And the one that I needed for my lesson objective, my SWABOT, as I call it, students will be able to, was attention equals care. And so because of that, I picked and chose parts of it. I chose parts of it to share with them, but I didn't read it so much as a letter. I just said, you know, this is my quote, and what do you think of it?
Yeah. What did they think of it? I
had their attention. Like they were looking, and you know, you can see in their faces that things sink in. I have had more challenge than I've had in the past with holding this line. I think that something I used to do was I took on an authoritative tone when it came to demanding attention. So I'd be like, eyes up here, stop talking. And then after the first week, I realized, you know, I've taught younger students in the past, and these ones are 18. So they're really looking to be treated conversationally and to be given that respect. And so I've changed my tone and I've said, okay, the line is different. And so now I'm fighting with them a little bit more for their attention. But I think having that why, returning to it, you know why I'm nagging you about this. I've told you. I think it still rings true.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Let's listen to about 30 seconds or so of this letter that we've been talking about.
September 1st, many years to come. Dear students, a wise friend once shared this quote with me. Attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. Simone Weil. But I would like to know, what do you think? Does attention equal generosity? Is attention rare in this world? Is generosity?
Ultimate cliffhanger.
Yeah. Dun, dun, dun.
And so listening to that, what or who was in your frame of reference when you were writing that?
That's such a good question. The friend who shared this quote with me, she's a really amazing person. She's a social worker.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, you know, I think that this quote really speaks to yours and my profession. And when she said this quote to me, I immediately thought, like, this isn't really answering your question,
mm-hmm.
but there's not much that I can guarantee of myself to people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can't promise really anything. But as a daughter, as a friend, as, you know, a coworker, as a stranger on the street, even, the one thing I can guarantee is my attention. Like, I will be present and I will listen. And so I really thought about everyone. I thought about everyone I've come into contact with. And it's, you know, a value is not something that you necessarily execute perfectly every moment of every day, but it's aspirational and it holds you to account. You know, so for me, it is sort of a North Star. It's like, okay, I'm gonna sit in this conversation because being present and attentive and caring, that's what matters to me.
And so your why, where did this value come from?
I think that I grew up in a household of just like a lot of divided attentions, you know. I think that my mom worked so hard and she just was constantly furiously moving from one thing to the next and had to support us. And I think that, you know, my dad has a disability and he has word finding problems as a result of that disability. And so I had these two sort of competing energies in the house. One person who was just rushing around to get the thing done because we had to, that was our sustenance. And this other person who was just like gentler and like needed the moment to find the words and is extremely eloquent when he does find the words. And I was just always like, man, you know, like, can we just pause together and pause? And so I think that I just found that this is the thing that holds me is those moments when we can just pause. And when I got my mom's attention in those moments, they were so special. Yeah. So I think that's important.
Yeah, I thank you for sharing. And I think you like painted such a deep picture for me and a deep understanding. And so you talked about earlier that you use like your reflection, you use your this as a way in which you have organized your thoughts and your anchor. Have you evolved in ways that this letter is either not true or additional things are true for you at this point? In addition to attention, in addition to your values, have you even had the chance to sit back and say, okay, these things now that I know, these are different?
Yeah. Thank you for that question. I think 2 weeks into this profession, and I can tell you that any amount of respect I had for teachers in the past, which I thought was already peak, has been amplified tenfold. Like, I didn't even know. And so, like, to be on my kids' case, to listen and do this and do that, it's cute, but like, I think that at the end of the day, showing up is what matters. I think I have this new prioritization simply because I can't do everything. I can't say all the things I want to say. And it's also true of my students, you know, if they're there, then I appreciate their presence. They have so much going on, you know, external of the ecosystem of our classroom. They have so much going on. And so just to see them there is already for me a kind of attention. And I think that that threshold is different than when I first stepped into the classroom. And so I often see their heads on the table, and I'm like, hey, come on, let's wake up, let's look. But if they can't, then I get that, and you know what? I'm just happy they're there.
Yeah, well put. What else is important for you to share?
To anyone ever, probably no one a part of this program, or maybe who will even listen to this, but to anyone ever who thinks that anyone can be a teacher, or that this is not rigorous work. I've had a lot of jobs in a lot of different spheres, and this is the most intellectually and interpersonally rigorous thing I've ever done. And like I said, it's invigorating, but it's exhausting, and it should be validated every opportunity possible.
Absolutely. Closing questions.
Okay.
What is your favorite thing or place in the surrounding Cambridge, Boston area?
Ooh. I love running. And today I ran around Fresh Pond, which I did a bunch of times this summer. And it's so fresh and green and beautiful. And yeah, if you haven't been, go.
You're the second person that mentioned Fresh Pond.
Really?
Yeah, so it sounds like I need to go. Yeah.
It's going to be crowded.
Yeah.
Oh, I should have kept that one to myself.
Last question.
Okay.
What makes you feel like you belong here at the Harvard Graduate School of Education?
Just that I care so much about what I do. And I'm surrounded by people who also care.
Yes.
I think that's it.
I'm just letting it sink in. Gallant, thank you. This was a pleasure. And I think you provided me with a lot of food for thought for the rest of the weekend. So
amazing.
On the rainy days. So
yeah. And thank you for this podcast and building this community. I'm just excited to hear all the other voices and their thoughts and integrate your tools into my practice and vice versa. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, until next time.
September 1st, many years to come. Dear students, a wise friend shared this quote with me. Attention is the rarest and purest form of generosity. Simone Weil. I would like to know, what do you think? Does attention equal generosity? Is attention rare in this world? Is generosity? I know. We're diving into deep thoughts. Take a moment. Just ponder. Is attention the rarest and purest form of generosity? Maybe consider a time someone gave you their full attention. What did that attention look like? What did that attention feel like? Or maybe consider a time when someone did not give you their full attention. What did that lack of attention look like and feel like? However you feel about these words at this time, I invite you to humor Vei's opinion. Give her, and me, 'cause I like this quote, a chance. Share attention with me between now and June. Let's give attention to the past. Let's give attention to the present. And let's give attention to the future. Don't freak out or anything, but you are the future. The truth is, I don't just like this quote. I really like this quote. Actually, I love this quote. Okay, actually, it's my favorite quote of all time. But I don't expect you to love Simone Weil's quote, or even like it very much, now or ever. I will never force you to think any one way. I will only ever ask that you be open to the possibility of another perspective. So, do me a favor. Take your time with this one. This idea that attention might be generosity, that both might be rare, that we can make them less rare in our classroom and beyond. It's not always easy, being open to maybe new, maybe strange thoughts, ideas, opinions, mores, norms, folkways. But I ask that we try to be open. Be open to Wei's opinion, be open to mine. I will try to be open to yours, always. Check me if I'm not. In mutual learning, Miss Z. Thank you.